Picture a farmhouse cellar in rural France, winter of 1847. No electricity, no refrigeration, no plastic wrap. Outside, temperatures are crashing below freezing. Inside that cellar, apples picked in October are still crisp in February. Carrots pulled in September are feeding a family in March. How? The answer is not luck, and it is not magic. It is physics, microbiology, and architecture working together in ways most of us have completely forgotten how to use. The question is why we stopped. For most of human history, keeping food alive through winter was not a hobby, and it was not optional. It was the difference between your family making it to spring or not. Every culture on Earth developed systems for this, and those systems were not random folk wisdom. They were field-tested over generations, refined by failure, and built around one core insight. If you control the environment around food, the food takes care of itself. Physics does not care what century you are living in. Let us start underground because the Earth itself is the oldest refrigerator on the planet. At a depth of roughly 6 to 10 feet, soil temperature in temperate climates stabilizes close to the annual mean air temperature, typically somewhere between 45 and 55 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. A well-built root cellar with proper drainage and ventilation can push that down further, targeting a storage band of 32 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit with humidity hovering between 85 and 95%. That is the exact window where root vegetables stop rotting and start waiting. The genius of the root cellar is that it does not fight the climate, it borrows from it. The thermal mass of surrounding soil acts as a giant, slow-moving battery, absorbing heat in summer and releasing it in winter, keeping that middle zone unnaturally stable. Families in 18th and 19th century Europe and North America knew this intuitively. They sited their cellars into north-facing hillsides to minimize solar gain, used stone or brick walls for additional mass, and designed simple ventilation shafts to dump warm air in summer and trap cold air in winter. No compressor, no refrigerant, no power bill. Now move from underground to the surface and think about evaporation. Ancient Egyptians and Persian households solved warm climate refrigeration without a single moving part. 2 nested clay pots, wet sand packed between them, and airflow moving across the outer surface. As the water in the sand evaporates, it pulls latent heat out of the inner chamber. This is not folk tradition. This is a direct application of thermodynamics. The inner pot can sit anywhere from 9 to 27 degrees Fahrenheit cooler than the surrounding air, depending on ambient humidity. In a dry desert climate, that margin is enormous. The zir pot, as it is called in Arabic tradition, is documented across ancient Egypt, Persia, and the broader Mediterranean world. The engineering insight is beautifully simple. Porous clay is not a flaw in the material. It is the mechanism. Water weeps slowly through the outer pot wall, hits dry air, evaporates, and the heat for that evaporation comes from inside the pot. The system scales to whatever size you need. It requires only water, clay, and airflow, and it fails gracefully, meaning a crack in the outer pot just slightly reduces efficiency rather than shutting the whole thing down. Smoke is next. And this one surprises people because we tend to think of smoking as a flavor technique. It is not. Flavor is a side effect. The actual purpose is chemistry. When you smoke meat or fish, 2 separate preservation mechanisms run simultaneously. First, the heat and moving air strip moisture out of the tissue, and without moisture, bacteria, yeast, and mold cannot get a foothold. Second, the smoke itself carries antimicrobial compounds, specifically phenols, acetic acid, and formaldehyde, that coat the surface and actively kill or inhibit microbial growth. You are applying a chemical barrier and removing the environment microbes need at the same time. Phenolic compounds in particular are worth understanding because they do something specific. They slow the oxidation of fats, which is what causes rancidity. In a fatty fish or a cut of pork belly, rancidity is the enemy almost as much as bacterial spoilage. Cold-smoked herring and salmon in northern European cultures were not just preserved, they were stabilized against the chemical degradation that would ruin taste and nutrition long before bacteria became an issue. Indigenous communities across North America and Siberia built dedicated smokehouses designed to channel low-temperature smoke across hanging meat for multiple days. This is documented engineering, not guesswork. One thing worth being straight about here, smoked food is not automatically indefinitely shelf stable. Storage life depends on how dry the product is, how much salt was used, ambient temperature after smoking, and how carefully the whole process was handled. Cold smoked products that retain significant moisture can still support pathogen growth if conditions are wrong. The old world practitioners understood this, which is why smoking was almost always used in combination with other controls like salt curing, drying, or root cellar storage. These were systems working together, not single magic bullets. Drying is the oldest preservation method on Earth, and the physics could not be simpler. Remove water, remove the possibility of microbial life. Bacteria, yeast, and mold all require moisture to metabolize and reproduce. Drop the water activity in a food below a certain threshold, and you have essentially paused biological time. Ancient civilizations across the Mediterranean, Central Asia, and polar regions all arrived at the same answer through completely independent development. Sun-dried figs in Greece, air-dried mutton on Central Asian caravan routes. Wind-dried fish hung on racks above the Arctic Circle. Same principle, same result. The Solar Dehydrator is the engineering refinement of basic sun drying, and 19th century homesteaders in Europe and North America had already worked out the key upgrades. A dark interior absorbs more radiant heat. Screened vents at the bottom and top create passive airflow that carries moisture away rather than letting it settle back on the food. A glass or translucent panel admits light and traps heat without letting rain or insects in. Off-grid builders today are reproducing this from basic woodworking and salvaged glazing, and they are building functionally the same device that was already in agricultural manuals 150 years ago. Fermentation is where it gets genuinely fascinating because this is not preservation by removal or exclusion. This is preservation by deliberate microbial warfare. You introduce the right bacteria, specifically lactic acid bacteria, and you let them colonize the food first. They consume the sugars and produce lactic acid as a byproduct. That acid drops the pH of the environment, and at that pH, harmful pathogens simply cannot compete. The food is preserved not because nothing is living in it, but because the right microorganisms have already won the territory and made it hostile to everything else. Sauerkraut in Germany, kimchi on the Korean peninsula, preserved olives across the ancient Mediterranean, kvass in Slavic cultures, fermented fish paste across Southeast Asia. Every culture that had access to surplus vegetables or protein eventually discovered that letting the right microbes go to work first was the most reliable way to make food last through lean seasons. These traditions are thousands of years old, they are chemically sophisticated, and they require nothing except the food itself, salt, a vessel, and time. The salt controls which bacteria dominate, the lactic acid bacteria do the rest. Salt itself deserves its own section because it was not a seasoning in the ancient and medieval world. It was a strategic resource. Roman soldiers were partly paid in salt, which is where the word salary comes from. Salt works through a process called osmosis. It pulls water out of microbial cells, dehydrating and killing them while simultaneously drawing moisture out of the food surface and creating a concentrated brine environment where pathogens struggle to survive. Salt-packed fish and meat could last months at ambient temperature in cool storage. Combined with smoking or drying, that window extended even further. Clamps are an underappreciated technique that almost nobody talks about outside of historical agriculture circles. A clamp is essentially a field expedient root cellar built directly on or just below the ground surface from nothing but the harvested crop itself, straw, and a thick layer of earth. You pile your potatoes or turnips into a cone or ridge shape, pack straw around them for insulation and humidity buffering, then mound earth over the whole assembly. The earth provides thermal mass, the straw moderates temperature swings and gas exchange, and the geometry of the pile allows carbon dioxide from respring vegetables to escape while cold air stays out. They solved this centuries ago. The question is why we forgot. The honest answer is that we did not forget by accident. Cheap grid electricity made mechanical refrigeration so affordable and so convenient that the old systems became economically invisible. There was no incentive to teach root cellar engineering or clay pot physics when a plug-in appliance solved the problem for less labor. But the old systems had properties that modern appliances do not. They are modular, they fail gracefully, they are field repairable with hand tools and local materials, and they keep working when the grid does not. That is exactly what preppers and off-grid builders are rediscovering right now. What strikes me about all of these systems is that none of them are mysteries. They are documented. The root cellar engineering is in agricultural bulletins. The fermentation chemistry is in food science literature going back more than a century. The evaporative cooler physics is basic thermodynamics. The smoking compounds are listed in any serious food preservation study. This knowledge did not disappear because it stopped working. It stepped aside because something more convenient showed up, and now that the convenience is looking less guaranteed than it once did, the old engineering is starting to look a lot more interesting again. If this channel is about anything, it is about treating old techniques as functional solutions rather than museum pieces. The root cellar, the zier pot, the smokehouse, the fermentation crock, the field clamp, these are not primitive. They are elegant. They use physics and biology and smart architecture to accomplish something that took modern civilization 3 separate industrial revolutions to replicate with electricity. If you want to go deeper on any one of these, there are links in the description and more episodes coming on each individual method. Drop a comment telling me which one you want next and subscribe so you do not miss it.